from and why I do what I do. And then I'll launch into discussion in general terms of our common home farms, and hopefully any questions you have, you can interrupt me if you want to. It doesn't have to be formal. You can answer as we go. I'm the Dean for the College of Arts and Sciences at St. Martin's University and the Interim Dean for the School of Business. But maybe more importantly, I'm an Evergreen State College graduate. I finally made it back to Olympia. I was out of state for about 15 years in Missouri, and then I did my 10 years of purgatory in Texas. Made it back here. I'm also an environmental historian. You can go to Amazon. I've got 4 books out. Probably my favorite book I did that received the most response is Environmental History of the Elwha River. That talks the long history of the river and the restoration of it. And I also just published a book, an edited collection with Char Miller, called The Nature of Hope on Environmental and Grassroots Organizing, that's built around labor, environmental justice, climate change, food justice. And you can see my framing if you're interested in the book chapter I did, which is essentially arguing that community farming constitutes a type of long-term structural environmental protest. It's a way to mitigate against climate change, food injustice, and issues like that. And so it's not a particularly profound argument, but it was a way for me to think through why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's legitimacy as a form of activism. So I went to graduate school at WSU, environmental history. I started community farming at Evergreen with the organic farm there. And then at WSU, there's a community farm, Koppel Farm, downtown Pullman. I was really involved with. If you ever go there and see the barn, I helped build that. I'm really proud of that. And then I kept doing community farming as just a way to be able to raise produce for myself, have some food to give to friends, to donate, and be involved in the community. And then it turned into a form of activism as we were teaching climate change in East Texas. I want you to imagine what that was like. Climate change in East Texas in 2007, 2010. And it was hard. And well, just convincing administrators that we could teach it. That was the fun part. And one day, we had a day that we called the Day the Students Cry, when our climatologists walked through the impacts of climate change, as projected back then. Of course, it's gotten much worse. And students would literally cry. I remember one day I walked across campus and I saw, and I wasn't there for that class that day, students sobbing on a bench, and I assumed the worst, something else. And she's like, no, we're all gonna die, everything. And I was like, all right, that. Yeah. So we decided, and I was doing a lot of reading then around the importance of building narratives of optimism and local responses. So we decided to start building in a stronger service learning component. And that was, for a lot of us, that was kind of where academics started buying into service learning. It's relatively new in mainstream institutions, right? I mean, everyone's imitating what Evergreen does now, right? And so we decided a good way to do that would be around food. So we started doing community farming. We started just volunteering at local organic and CSA operations. Then I went to San Antonio and worked at a university, Incarnate Word, which has a friend of mine called Incarnate Word the Roman Catholic Evergreen University. The sisters have a strong social justice, the Sisters of Charity and Incarnate Word, strong social justice mission. We're, in fact, investigated by Pope Benedict. And I really started to learn some skills around community engagement, working with the sisters and leaders of their Center of Civic Engagement at University Incarnate Word. And as a team, we built out a garden on campus. And like anyone as a farmer, whenever you get somewhere new, you're looking for where you can plant food, right? And where you can be involved in that community. But then we did, the big thing we did there was we built or expanded. So we built 3 new and expanded 1. Community gardens, I hesitate to call them farms, I don't think the yields justify that term, but pretty substantial community gardens, all located in pretty desperately poor parts of San Antonio, true food deserts, like miles before you see a grocery store. And even when you go to the grocery store, the produce is overpriced and it's outdated. And 3 of those were co-located with schools, a Head Start that served 320 students, and then 1 was at a cultural center that did a lot of what Peter does, for example, serving the community. And we had strong involvement from the sisters, the Center of Civic Engagement, students who at Incarnate Word have a service requirement to graduate, and then faculty. And that was building the service learning part with faculty was the key piece there. And I'm proud to announce that those programs are all still in place and going, and 2 of them have grown fairly substantially. So that's kind of where I cut my teeth, like transitioning into how to do this in a way that's engaging with the community, that addresses food justice issues and climate change, and also tie it back into the mission of the university, and making mistakes along the way to learn how to do it better. But I think one impact we had, I was teaching a climate change course with a San Antonio focus, and the city of San Antonio was planning an urban farm, but was making sort of all the classic sort of colonizer mistakes. It was horrifying. And fortunately, all my students, we had been studying that, and we'd been studying asset-based community development, and they made a presentation that had the city of San Antonio completely change its course and the model it was going to use. The one was much more friendly to the surrounding community, which was definitely very underserved. So, I mean, I'd probably tell you more about that than I need to. But so I got to St. Martin's University. As a dean, I have a lot of responsibilities, but still looking for those opportunities to both farm and engage with the community. I met this guy, Peter Epperson. I brought some students, so I always build some service and/or service learning into all my courses, regardless. And I brought a group of students down to volunteer at Community Kitchen, and I noticed they had some beds in front, and I volunteered to work on those beds. And he said, "Well, how would you like to run a farm instead?" He introduced me to Jan and Dean Pigman, and that's a big piece of what we're doing. But before we started working it, so our Common Home Farms has 4 sites, and our Common Home also comes from the title of the encyclical Laudato Si by Pope Francis about climate change, economic injustice, and his argument for integral ecology, which of course many of us are already familiar with from our own readings and study. And St. Martin's is a Roman Catholic university and a Benedictine university, and we're also working with Pope John Paul II. Those are key collaborator. So we're emphasizing Catholic social teachings and Benedictine values in our mission. We have 4 sites. The first site we actually developed was at Parsons Family Farm on Wiggins Road, so I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. And so if you're driving down the road and you're seeing some trees along the road that need to be the grass cut down, I need to get down there and lay mulch again, that was us. We have both a kind of a kitchen garden site where I'll be working tonight, and then we planted last year somewhere around the range of 30 to 40 fruit, nut, berry trees. So we're trying to do a small food forest there for the productive mosaic landscape, right? We're doing that slowly over time, right? Because of course John Peters is the one who's doing the craft district. He's also an overcommitted, busy person. So we actually started working there. Then Peter made the connection with us for Jan and Dean. And then we really shifted our focus to pigment for a lot of good reasons. We also have 2 other sites, Sacred Heart Church in Lacey, which is right next to our campus. We have a community garden there ran by Sam Fox, who's a biology faculty member. And then we have a large property south of Olympia where we've been planting fruit nut trees and also building a green belt with Douglas firs and other trees. And I'm not sure where that's going to go, and I don't want to get into it too much more. It could be a great opportunity that takes us further down the permaculture, regenerative agricultural model. It may not. So we're just building that relationship and planting a few trees every year and see where it goes. And so I would also say that these 4 sites were doing different things. At the Pigman Produce Patch, it's traditional agriculture primarily, following organic principles. I'm just going to say right here, we're not certified organic, right? They gave that up a couple years ago because of the cost and the amount of work involved in it, but we still do all the same things, right? And then soil conservation principles and trying to build healthy soil. That's Pigman's. And then at Parsons and the site south of town, we're doing more around regenerative agriculture, food forest approaches. And then at Sacred Heart, it's, you know, it's just a large community garden, a lot of plots, and we're sort of doing your annual sort of agriculture. We're trying to put more berries in. I should note that that's right next to their food pantry. So we harvest and carry. It's like 100 feet away from the plot. And so those are the 4 main sites. The leadership team is myself, and we are trying to follow this sort of democratic consensus model, so there's not one person in charge. It's myself, Julia Chavez, who's a professor of English and also the director of Center for Teaching and Scholarship at St. Martin's University, and just a real dynamo in terms of, she's done a great job of building faculty and student support for this at St. Martin's, as has our Office of Campus Ministry. And we actually made a hire around social justice service and activism that's really been crucial for our building out our support. And then Sam Fox, biology faculty, and then Stephen Holland, who's a teacher at Pope John Paul II High School, but a leader in that community. And Stephen and I started together at Pigment. So these pieces sort of all came together and coalesced into. So that's the big picture for those. We do a lot. I'm not going to try to talk about everything, but you'll have opportunities to ask questions. Maybe I'll stop now and see if you have any questions. Okay, just wave me down.
I'm just curious about the pigment. I don't know anything about pigment, so I don't.
It's their last name, but you'll get like even better their first name because a certain age demographic. Jan and Dean, right? I was like, oh, that's awesome. Steve's looking around like, what the? It's an old California surfer rock band. Yeah, from the 60s. Wipeout. Look up Wipeout. Yeah. Oh, the question was about the name Pigman, which is, you know, an unusual name. So Jan and Dean Pigman, that is their real last name, and so it's called Pigman's Produce Patch or Pigman's Produce, right? Yeah, let me talk about that a little bit. So yeah, I guess I'm operating on assumption everyone knows it's a 7-acre property. About 4.5 acres are worked. They're still a commercial operation. We work a portion of the land there, and every year we're expanding the portion of the land we work there. We have a contract with them, and we're also then helping with the berries, but you know, their property's bisected by a little dirt road with a shed at the end, and we'd been on one side over by the greenhouses using part of the green. They have 2 greenhouses and a hoop house, and the hoop house we put new plastic on, hadn't been used for a while. And then on the other side, they were doing all their farmers market sales, and you pick. We are on the, I'm trying to remember which direction, which is which, but we're on both sides now, and we're using most of the greenhouse and the hoop house and the back greenhouse. But it's very much a cooperative relationship. I do talk to Jan and Dean almost daily now. And I'm out there an average of about 20 hours a week, sometimes more, working with them. And I have 2 student employees that work out there, and then a lot of volunteers. By May 4th, pretty early in the season, we already had 1,200 volunteer hours with 107 unique volunteers. A lot of those being students from St. Martin's University, a lot of those being students from Pope John Paul II High School, and then some parents and faculty and teachers. Just at Pigman's, which is really the heart of our operation. And Jan and Dean, you know, when I met them 3 years ago, and Peter took me down there on a tour of them, they were really ready to hand off the farm. Literally, they've been looking for someone who could take it on. But what I proposed was, let's build a relationship over time and see how it goes. And so every year we pick up a little bit more. And we're learning. Lord have mercy. It's like being back in, I don't know. I wrote a little essay we're going to put on our website called String Theory, because they use strings. I don't know if you guys have been out there when they're running the strings, right? Strings for fertilizing, strings for the bed, strings up, strings down, wind it up in a certain way. And it's like Dean's, you know, I just feel like a 14-year-old again, right? I was doing everything wrong. And I framed it in that classic sort of urban guy doesn't understand rural ways sort of thing. It's just sort of a rhetorical strategy. But there's clear wisdom in it because they're trying to conserve their inputs, their resources, right? A margin-thin economic enterprise. And so now I'm the one telling how to run strings while the kids look at me like I'm crazy. Anyways, So we're learning all the time, and that's been the key piece, I think, in building this relationship this way, is spending the time, the students spending time with Jan, the faculty, and Dean, and learning everything about how to spray for aphids, how to plant. Why? Just our strawberry field is, the strawberries are sweeter. So the strawberry field we planted last year, 6B, if I remember correctly, versus the other strawberry field that they'd planted 2 years ago, our strawberries are sweeter right now, and they ripened earlier. And she argues that that's because we didn't have the mulching in place as early as they did. So we're getting more sugars produced. And she's walked me through. So it's just like that. And so it's great. But that is the heart of our operation. And so what we're doing at Pigman's is we have CSA sales. We provide assistance for them with the farmers market stuff. We're looking to open a stand at the Yelm Farmers Market as soon as we can figure that out. It's just a time thing, because I'll probably be staffing that myself. Yelm Farmers Market. So if you're out in Yelm on Saturday, sometime soon, look for me. And we are interested in the Tumwater Farmers Market. And I had a student tell me, you really need to go there because it's packed and really busy. So we have to figure out, can we get set up on it? So I'll be reaching out to you.
Let's go right after this meeting.
Yeah, I have a meeting. Sorry. Yeah, but I'll cut out sometime in my schedule, maybe next Wednesday, if I can make it out there. And then also the big piece, which is really exciting. I kind of skipped over the question. Let me make sure I talk about this. When we talk about Catholic social teachings, we focus on social teachings like the preferential option for the poor. That's kind of the liberal way of saying it. It's from the Medellin Conference in 1969, which was one of the bases of liberation theology, for example. Or you just say the option for the poor. That's the more mainstream way of saying it. Care for creation, right? And then the Benedictine value that ties into that is stewardship. It's a very important value to Benedict. It's not just the environmental world, but also their resources and their tools. They actually have some tools they've been using since the 1890s. They take such good care of their equipment. So dignity of persons, the dignity of labor. There's some others in there as well that I'm forgetting. There's one Catholic social teaching called subsidiarity, which is the argument that to the degree you're capable of it, you need to craft local solutions as opposed to relying to larger entities like the church or government to fix those solutions for you. So whenever we have students out there for the first time, we walk them through all this, the Catholic social teachings, the Benedictine values, but maybe most important is the value and the St. Martin's theme of community. And that's what we've been able to do very effectively, is really build and strengthen our community through the farm program that we're doing. And also the Benedict tradition of self-reliance and sustainability. And so until about the 1970s, there was ongoing farm operations at St. Martin's. And one time they had 2,000 chickens, 300 pigs, and those fields everybody walks around now that's filled with Mazama pocket gophers and invasive species. They had farm operations, and they did what a lot of businesses did. They contracted commercial food operation and were no longer able to sell their food to them. And so what we've been able to do is restore at St. Martin's that Benedictine tradition of providing for yourself, and just kind of wrapping it up here. We are now part of Bon Appetit's. That's our food concession, but they're at a lot of places in the region. I think Amazon actually uses Bon Appetit, if I remember correctly. We're now on their farm to fork vendor program. We're a preferred vendor. So now we're selling produce to Bon Appetit on campus. I made my first big delivery this week. I learned how to use Square. I was so proud of myself. I'm kind of a Luddite. And we'll be selling produce to Bon Appetit, which is then what's fed to our students, our faculty, monks, a lot of Washington State employees who come over to eat on campus. And that's part of that Benedictine tradition. And also it's also focusing on locally produced food. And it's scalable. We're going to try to make that as much as possible. So, and we also sold them some produce for the big gala that we have every October. So that that's some of what we're doing. Maybe I'll pause again and see if you have questions. I just threw a lot out at you.
How
Rachel.
many CSA members?
Approximately 20, but a lot of partials. I was hoping for more fulls. So yeah, so we did our first pickup last Friday, and we have Friday, Saturday pickup at the Pigments. We're also going to do a downtown location with senior services, their Columbia Street address. And then whatever, if it doesn't get picked up, it gets donated, right? So that's a great opportunity to mention that. Well, I'm starting to skip something. So we have a strong emphasis on food justice, both access to food, but also labor and food production and the agro-industrial complex. We talk about that. We teach about that. When we do service learning, we build out assignments related to this, and then we have them do the work and then reflect on how they're dealing with issues like this, but also a lot around climate change. And for me, community farming is kind of my Trojan horse that I can, oh, look, this was climbing out. We're going to have a conversation about climate change. And I don't just mean with our activists, but I mean the board of trustees, right? It's just maybe a somewhat more, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, complex response. But, I attended a conference in Corvallis, Chrysalis Symposium, and Jamie Margolin, who leads the 0 Hour group, the high school and college kids who organize around climate change. She challenged us to say one thing we're going to do differently when we go home. I said, I'm gonna be a little more aggressive and when I talk to people who have money and power and influence. So I recently did a presentation to the board of trustees. I pushed pretty hard. Yeah. So, but it's this opportunity to bring out climate change impacts, both in terms of our access to food, what's going to happen to food production systems, but also how do we build climate change resilience, the ecosystem services that are provided by urban farms and community farms. So we walk all the students to that too. And then we're trying to build out the academic piece of that as well at St. Martin's University. So in terms of the food justice, we donate. So that's the key piece. We our first summer, we donated around 4,000 pounds of produce, primarily to Community Kitchen. There was one epic day where we gave them a lot of way too big squash. We've gotten better about that. Community Kitchen and St. Leo's Food Connection in Tacoma are our two key clients. So they both, Peter comes on Tuesday, and then Kevin from St. Leo's Food Connection comes on Thursdays. So we just pre-pack it and they grab it and go. We're planning to expand and start donating more to senior services, which Peter's also helped with that. And then last fall, we, for 7 weeks until we ran out of produce, we did a distribution on campus because, frankly, we have staff and adjuncts and students who need it. So we just brought in a couple 100 pounds of produce, set it out on tables from the student union, and it was very popular. So we're hoping to grow that out and do more with that. So last year we donated over 6,000 pounds of produce, and our goal this year is 12,000 pounds of produce. And the whole reason of the CSAs, and we're doing the farmers market in Yale and all that, is because I want it to be revenue neutral, or as close to revenue neutral as possible for St. Martin's. I have put money into it from my budget, but not an extensive amount. We've also had some donations, also not an extensive amount. So we are really, dependent on what we, when I'm running my budget and saying, do I have enough to pay my student workers this week, right? Because we have to generate that revenue. But I think if we can do that, then it's going to be easier to pitch to other universities that you're not tapping facilities or faculty pay to do this. You're going to be able to do this and mostly pay for it or completely pay for it. So.
I think I understood you to say, but I wanted to be more clear, that you're trying to work on getting the university back to eating from what you're producing rather than buying it elsewhere.
As much as possible.
Yeah.
Right.
And how far do you feel like you've gotten so far in that goal?
Well, when we did the preferred vendor program, I had to write up my thing, and then the head chef, who fortunately is a big slow food, local food guy, he had to do his, and he had to do a projection, and he actually projected buying around a quarter of their produce from us. which was more than I thought. He'd go much lower and much more cautious. And then our agreement is that it's scalable. If we can produce the food, and the problem is the pigments is most productive, from June to August. Of course, that's when most students are gone. So that's a hit for us. But as much as we can produce, and as long as they're happy with it, they'll continue to expand how much they buy from us. So they're very interested in this, and we'll turn it into a story for their magazine. Bravo Bon Appetit has a magazine, and that's a big emphasis of Bon Appetit as well as locally sourced foods. So there's a really cool story. And what's happening now is people saying, why don't you do it on campus? And I joke about the Mazama pocket gopher tour I got from our facilities guy. They're everywhere except for a couple of spots. But we are working on a mitigation plan, and if that happens, we may be able to open up some sites on campus where we can do that. But that'll be up to the monks. The land's owned by the Abbey. It's not owned by the university. They let us use the land. So and the fruit and that tree start producing, that's going to yield fruit. Well, that takes longer. That's something else we do as well.
Krista, you awake? Mac.
Apparently I made somebody mad when I did. Well, so I have a sense of humor, and but I'm kind of intense, so I use humor to mitigate the intensity. But there's a movie called Pacific Rim. I don't know if anyone saw it. You gotta just laugh. You gotta hear it, not just see the movie, right? It's actually a great movie. It's by the same guy who made Pan's Labyrinth, right? His name I can't remember right now. But it's a monster movie, right? It's Jaegers and kaiju, like the old Godzilla movies. And its tagline was, go big or go extinct. And so I put that on one of my slides, and a little double entendre for the group in there. And I said, anyone who knows me, I'm a go big or go home kind of guy. But in reality, we are talking about, some pretty serious implications. And I said I challenge all of you to go home and read the latest IPCC report. And because there's millionaires in that room, right? And there's one in particular, pretty conservative, a lot of money, that I made sustained eye contact for probably 2 minutes while we talked, because it's one tool, right? I don't know how to build a machine that's going to sequester carbon. I don't have that skill set. But, part of this challenge is how do we locally and in the ways we can work on this as a society, right? I think I tried to make it nice, but no, I didn't get any pushback, but I heard a couple things. So, and no donations. I was hoping for some donations, yeah. But they've been generally supportive. Small donations in the past. 2 board members have donated, I should say. Dino Batali, who owns the restaurant Salome up in Seattle, owned it. And then Kathy Beecher also wrote us a check. So we are seeing that support. We've had some equipment. We haven't been able to use it. We had some equipment donated. So, and we're just trying to bring, we meet people where they are and try to bring them along, right? Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, when you mentioned the chef, I was wondering how much you work with actual food service folks, and has the menu been affected at all?
Mm-hmm.
Have they changed what they're serving, or I'm assuming that you have some kind of relationship where they ask you to grow certain things?
Yes. Yeah, that's great. That's part of the projection was he walks through, and this time of year is what I know you have is what we like to grow. His name's Matt Allspaw. And what we're doing is just having sustained dialogue. And he's saying, whatever you can grow, we'll find ways to cook it, right? Even stuff I wouldn't, like Jerusalem artichoke. He got really excited when I mentioned tons of Jerusalem artichoke. And even like foraging stuff. So yeah, he's really cool. And so I actually did a kind of a donation delivery last week just to sort of get my schedule. I'm one of those people have to do it to figure it out. Get my schedule figured out, and they immediately cooked the asparagus as part of a dish, and they put all the lettuce out on a salad bar. They put up placards saying Our Common Home Farms. They pushed out on Instagram, so I had everybody approaching me. I didn't even know they were doing it that day. So, and then for the gala, they have their menu in place, so he's giving me the ingredients list. So the stuff, so when I'm planning in the greenhouses, I'm planning for us, but I'm also keeping in mind, because we were still harvesting tomatoes, cherries late November out of the greenhouses last year. Yeah, climate change. So planting also for that gala event, right? So we are working really closely, and that whole staff's excited. You know, I took them on a tour last year and just said, eat this, eat this, eat this, eat this, eat this, right? And Jan and I, it's always Jan and I. Jan and I always lead these tours together, and I do the 30,000-foot view, and she does the specifics and corrections when I get it wrong, and nicely, of course. She's a wonderful person, and that they kind of fell in love with it. We did another recent tour, and they're trying to, you know, they're already working up an article. So again, a long answer to your question, but very responsive and ongoing dialogue about what they can do. Yeah.
Might have this on you. Are you able to talk about the upcoming project in City of Lacey?
Yeah. Let me run. That's my last thing.
Okay.
So let me run through. I did talk about we're building out service learning, and that's the key. Is again, there's service. It's like, you know, to graduate from this class, you got to go to 3 hours of community kitchen. You got to do community kitchen one day. Service learning being you're going to read Wendell Berry, and then you're going to read this, and then you're going to go work for 6 hours, and then you're going to write an essay reflecting on that, right? And we're building out that service learning we've had a lot of service learning with a few faculties. Some of you probably know Rena Gindelman. She's done that quite a bit. Teresa Winstead, for example. We're trying to pull, and especially these new faculties being built into orientation. And of course, Julia running the Center for Teaching and Scholarship is really encouraging faculty to do this. So that I really want to emphasize, that's one way we're going to get there, is through expanding our service learning and the volunteers. So we have students that are becoming proficient over a long period of time, right? That's always the problem with students. You teach them and then they go away. But right now, one of our student employees, Carly James, has been volunteering as a Pope John Paul II high school volunteer for 2 years. I employed her now. She's starting at St. Martin's in the fall in our new nursing program. So we could have her for 6 years out there. And she's really knows what she's doing. So, and then I talked about volunteers, and yes, the next thing was new opportunities. So we are talking with City of Lacey, and this is Rachel and I and Jen Burbridge have been talking about things we could do. So St. Martin, Our Common Home Farms is working with Parks and Recreation to build a community garden by the new museum depot. We're going to build a new depot and the museum next to it. We're going to build a community. We were talking food forest, but I didn't know there used to be a plywood factory there. So they're doing a soil test, but I'm pretty sure what the answer is going to be. So we'll probably just do raised beds, right, and some a community garden point there that can emphasize some education and recreation. You know, when kids are tired of the museum, maybe want to get out, but also emphasizing people being just able to pick stuff and eat it, which is what we've done with all of our gardens in San Antonio and other places. And then Rachel and Jen and I are going to be doing a tour, I guess, next week or the week after. Yeah, in about 2 weeks, we're going to be looking at 5 different sites where we think there's some possibilities for community gardening, and talk about the process we need to go through first, which is, meeting with community members, doing some surveys, doing some education, determining what talent is in the community and interest and support. But Jen she's the director of Parks and Rec. I don't know who knows who, is very excited about this. And that's how I actually got to know her before I joined the Historical Commission. Was she called me once to ask some questions about community farming and stuff.
And just last week or 2 weeks ago, on her leadership, the City of Lacey passed a resolution supporting community gardening in their so, woo-hoo.
Yeah,
No money, no time.
Right. It's a good rhetorical strategy.
It's the highest policy level we can get to, and you can start doing that.
Right. Yeah, no, it's great, and we can get something started. We can operationalize it, and then at St. Martin's, what I'm getting now, and being a dean's tricky. It's a lot of politics, and faculty are smart, and savvy. And I'm getting now from faculty and administrators, why aren't we doing something academically? Because normally, right, you would have an academic program. But if I came in and said, look, I want to launch a community gardening program or a master's program in community resilience, it's always like, well, everyone already has one. I'm like, I think there's room for more. But two, well, where are you going to get a farm? So I already answered that. I've got a farm. I've got land. So I'm getting, it's flipped, and that's nice for me because it's actually in some ways building academic programs easier. Now, so why don't you have classes? Well, that's a good point. I should do that. So we're looking at, that's sneaky. We're looking at whether to build it into the environmental studies major we just launched a couple of years ago. And, you know, St. Martin's is really venturing kind of boldly into areas where it's only been a few faculty in the past to do more of this work, but potentially even graduate programs around community resilience, right? So not like the environmental studies program at Evergreen, environmental science program at Evergreen. And I think that basically wraps up my presentation.
My question is, can I tag along and learn from the process you're going through with the city of Lacey? Because I'm pushing the city of Tumwater, and it's all just kind of conversations at this point, but I want to ramp that up to make a concerted effort to get a resolution so already started. And I was able to get them to put language in their municipal parks district ballot measure that passed last year. I got the words community gardening in there. And so,
baby steps.
And so now they're on record that the voters voted for it.
Yeah.
And there's money. And so now, anyway, I need to learn like how to do the next part.
Well, I can't speak for Jen, but I would welcome you along. I guess we asked Jen if that'd be okay, and that'd be
particularly the figuring out what resources are in the community and working with the citizens that would be the gardeners. They've done that stuff before, so I'd be really interested in taking along and learning.
Yeah, and right now Lacey doesn't have the resource ability. They're willing to give us land and maybe the water and maybe more. So it is huge. You're right. Thank you.
That's a lot of what Tumwater has
right.
put on the table when asked what they would do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that is huge because she's identified multiple parks where we'd be welcome to do it. But they are looking for someone who can oversee it, and then how do you produce the ongoing sustainable labor so that it doesn't die? Yeah. But we'll check with Jen. Yeah, sure.
This is a little bit off topic, but only a little bit. So in terms of food waste, I've been told by people that all of the older universities and companies are totally on top of this. So yeah, so I just wanted to ask you at St. Martin's, like what the cafeteria folks do to try to educate students or manage food waste.
Yeah. So everything they use in the kitchen is compostable or recyclable. That's one. I've been learning all this. Like 2 months ago, I wouldn't have known this, but as I've been working more with Bon Appetit, they do generate food waste. Some of that goes to the chickens that Brother Edmund runs, a large chunk of that. On average, they have about 80 pounds a day of food waste. Some portion of that goes to the chickens, but we are trying to boot up a conversation about how we could compost that food ourselves. I think it'd be, because the part of the challenge is building soil, because, right, pigments are in great soil. A lot of other places aren't. And so how can we build out more soil, especially for using raised beds and not having to buy it all? But right now, that's kind of a bridge too far for me because I'm trying to just make it through this summer. But I have what I call, winter projects, right? But we have talked about, and they would be interested in doing that because they've had some sort of student dissent about food waste. And the students have, coming out of classes, they've been doing some educational things for other students about food waste. So yeah, but I don't know how far it's gotten us.
I heard a presentation that they call food chain symposium. They actually had someone from Microsoft talking about what they had tried to use in the country. And one of the things that I one time went, oh, was they figured out just the order of where they put the food in the line. You know, people tend to take more stuff at the beginning of the line. So they were, you know, just being strategic about where they put stuff. So
Right.
students would just take stuff that they weren't going to eat.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in real quickly. We have about 2 minutes left. So, what I'd like to do is, if there's any other questions, just go around and we'll jot them down and then maybe just have you respond to them.
Yeah.
In text or something for this other specific command.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Continue the conversation.
When do you sleep?
I wake up. It's funny. I'll tell you a funny story. I did 32 hours over 7 days. We had a little stretch there. We had some downtime, more, you know, and I was worn out. And I told Jan that I was a farmer now because I went to bed at 9:30 and I woke up at 4:30. I like to set her up to give me a heart. I like to be straight man for Jan. She's like, well, we were still working at 9:30 last night. I was like, yeah, my email is, you'll share, I guess. Yeah. So, but thanks. I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah.